Well, as Republicans and GOP media are encouraging Americans not to get vaccinated and just go out there and die for your party, right? Something very different just happened in France. And I mentioned yesterday that I thought this was going to happen. And after I got off the air, sure enough, it did happen. And that is that the French president, Emmanuel Macron, announced new health rules. Now, France right now is hosting the Cannes Film Festival. And it was one of the first, major events in Europe where, well, maybe in France, where they absolutely required proof of vaccination to get in. But Cannes is like one of those things where if you're going to Cannes, you're rich to begin with, in all probability. I mean, unless you're one of the poor filmmakers. It's like, a lot of the people who go to Cannes are, it's like you come flying in your private jet. Of course they're vaccinated. And they're not idiots. They're not Republicans. But yesterday he extended that. Now the European Union has come up with what they refer to as the digital COVID certificate. And, pops up on your smartphone, and you can get it two ways. One, you can get it by being vaccinated. Two, you can get it by having a negative COVID test, but then it expires after a week or two. But it'll get you into an event, it'll get you into a restaurant, it'll get you into, whatever you want to, into Cannes, if you've been tested negative within the previous, I frankly don't know the period of time. I know it's a matter of weeks before the certificate expires. But what Macron announced yesterday was that you may not go into any cultural venues like museums, theaters, movie theaters, concert halls. You may not go into any of those places starting July 21st without your digital certificate, your vaccine passport. And starting on August 1st, in, 2 weeks, you have to have this pass in order to get into a restaurant, a cafe, a coffee shop, a retail store, on a train, on a plane, or basically in any kind of public place that is regulated by the government, where the government has any say in their ability to interact with the public, which is pretty much all of them. You get this QR code. And so the question that I guess this is kind of a follow-on to the first hour where I'm asking, is it possible that what I'm asserting, that the Republican Party actually has decided that letting more people die will work to their advantage, because if a lot of people start dying and filling up hospitals, the economy will slow down. If the economy slows down, that hurts the party in power. The party right now that holds the White House, the Senate, and the House is the Democratic Party, and therefore it'll hurt the Democratic Party and Republicans will get elected. So that, that was my premise of last hour. I think it dovetails nicely with this question of why can't we do what France is doing? The EU digital passport is not rocket science. You've got, similar things have been rolled out in New York and California already. I think in New York they call it the Empire Pass. It's the Empire State. So, and multiple states are working on this. You've got Clear, the company. If you've traveled through an airport in the last couple of years, you've probably noticed these little Clear stations where you go up and you just put your fingerprint, a handprint basically on their machine. And it recognizes you, and it takes your picture and recognizes you, and boom, you jump the entire line. Go right straight onto the plane, or into the gate area, or into the terminal area to head to the plane. So Clear is coming out, and they've now gone private or public, by the way. This company just went public a month or so ago. They're coming out with a digital vaccine passport, essentially. It's not like we lack the technology. It's not like we're not smart enough to do it. It's not like our companies can't do it. Microsoft said that they were going to roll one out months ago. I'm not sure if they ever did. I think maybe they got, when the Republican Party decided to make it political, they kind of backed off. As I said in the last hour, you've got 6 or 7 states now that have made it illegal to require vaccine passports in public schools, and 23 states that have legislation pending, 12 of them it's passed, to make it illegal for stores to require a vaccine passport to get in. I mean, good luck enforcing that, right? This is, but yeah, because it's simply an extension of no shirt, no shoes, no service. We reserve the right to refuse service to anybody based on whether they have the possibility or probability of spreading a deadly disease. But here we are. So there's that. This is happening in Europe. They're getting their act together. They're saying, okay, enough. We don't want any more people to die. Here in the United States, the Biden administration is doing their best. They vaccinated, you know, we finally hit that 70% target of people over 18. But that's still only about 50, I think around 53, 54% of Americans are now, you know, vaccinated or have their first shot. Fully vaccinated, we're below 50%, if my memory is correct. We're floating in that territory. We still have a long way to go. And what is slowing it down? What is blocking this? What is preventing people like Louise and I from showing up in a local restaurant? It's that I don't know that the guy sitting next to me without a mask isn't some mask hole, some Trumplican who just got infected with COVID and is in his most contagious state but doesn't yet realize he's sick. He may just have a little tickle in the back of his throat for a day or two until he ends up in the ICU. And he's breathing all over me or breathing upwind of me. I really think vaccine passports are absolutely necessary if we're going to put our economy back together. And that we have to vaccinate more Americans. This is very straightforward stuff. So there's that. Then we also have now these Texas Democratic lawmakers who left the state yesterday. They said, okay, you know, you want to pass a law making it harder for black people and brown people to vote. And by the way, it's not just black and brown people that the Republicans are specifically targeting with this law. And it's not just Texas. Texas is like, you know, the 10th or 12th or 14th Republican state to roll out one of these laws. Georgia was one of the first, and it caused national outrage. It's why Major League Baseball is playing their game in Colorado this week rather than in Atlanta. It's because of the Georgia law. So Texas, but they're not just targeting black and brown people. They're also targeting low-income people, young people, and people over 65 who tend to vote, you know, for Social Security and Medicare. And that's why, you know, the over 65 thing, that's why in Texas, your driver's license has to be current. Well, what if you're 80 years old and you don't drive anymore? Sorry, you can't vote. You can use a shooter's license. You can use your concealed carry permit in Texas to vote, but you can't use the ID from a state university that, by the way, does check your citizenship. It's a state-issued ID, but no, you can't use that. Why? Because young people use those. Young people right now, this generation, this millennial generation coming up, are overwhelmingly voting Democratic. And many of them, you know, are far more progressive than your mainstream Democrats. In fact, I'd say probably the majority of them. They're more like I am, you know. They're what, you know, we've called over the last 6 or 8 years Bernie-crats. Although, you know, that mantle goes way beyond Bernie Sanders did, which is exactly what Bernie wanted. He has become the mainstream. Isn't that cool? So what do we do with this? Well, the Texas legislators got on 2 chartered planes last night and flew to Washington, D.C. They're going to be there until there's 50 of them. And they're going to be there until August, when this special session that Greg Abbott has called expires, August 7th. And then they're going to fly back to Texas, and Greg Abbott, the Republican governor of Texas, says when they return, he's going to arrest them. Now, keep in mind, this is the same guy who put Crystal Mason, a young black woman who had gotten out of jail and didn't know that she wasn't eligible to vote, went to her polling place. They said, you're not on the list. And the polling person said, here's a provisional ballot, and we'll check your eligibility. She filled out the provisional ballot. They checked her eligibility, found that indeed she wasn't eligible to vote, and they never counted her vote. Crystal Mason was sentenced to 5 years in prison. She's serving her sentence right now. And then you've got, what's his name? Yeah, here we go. In fact, I contributed, I think, $100 to his bail fund. Hervis Rogers is his name, down in Texas. Same deal. And the thing that's, he was an ex-felon and he thought he could vote and he couldn't. And here's the kicker. In 2007, the Texas House and Senate passed a law that would have, quote, required the Texas Department of Criminal Justice to provide written notification to discharged prisoners regarding their lack of voter eligibility, right? In other words, tell people when they get out of jail, by the way, you can't vote. They passed a law in 2007 requiring that. That law was vetoed by Rick Perry, who was the governor at the time. We don't want to tell the prisoners they can't vote. Are you kidding? We'd much rather rearrest them and make an example out of them for any black person or person of color who wants to vote. Because they're not going after white people for voting in Texas. They're going after black people. So what do we do with this? Do you think, I'm very hopeful that these 50 Texas legislators are going to bring a moral force with them. Now, you've also got, Moral Mondays, Reverend Barber. You got a bunch of people who are pushing really, really hard. Drill a hole in that filibuster, blow up that filibuster, do whatever it takes to pass the For the People Act. And Joe Biden's going to give a speech on it in about 2 hours.